So this should have captions. Yes, perfect. Okay. Hello, everyone. I can't see you right now because I'm obviously looking at a card because I'm screen sharing. Very happy to be here. Obviously, Ellis, Ariana, a number of friends are here, and I wanted to contribute whatever I could. And I also know that you've attended a lot of sessions the past couple of days, so you might be a little like information and talked out. So I wanted to make this sort of fun and conversational. The thing that Ellis and I talked about is I have a platform that helps communities of people get into like flow states and kind of do like deep work, and it helps with distraction. I'm medically diagnosed with ADHD, and actually, which is thanks to Ellis. She had suggested that I get tested, and she was correct. So what I was going to do is say flow states are kind of an abstract concept. They're super helpful. Let's break it down into some concrete productivity tips that are kind of like the constituent parts, the building blocks of getting into a flow state. And to set the table, let me just explain like the concept of flow state, for those of you who don't know, is it is a state of high concentration. We often can naturally block distraction as well as sort of lose context around time and things like that. You just like are deep in your whatever you're doing, and the components that usually make that possible are you're working on a task that you think is meaningful. In other words, if you think you're wasting your time, it's hard to get into flow because you just kind of hate the task. It's usually something where you have a skill set applies to it. So when you hear the famous quotes about flow states from like Picasso or Michael Jordan or Einstein, you know, it's usually doing something that they have a skill set that applies to. You never hear Michael Jordan talk about getting into flow while painting. You don't hear Picasso talk about getting into flow while playing basketball. So it's something where you have skills that apply, and it's challenging for you, but it's not out of reach. And there are some other things that help. Sometimes certain kinds of music help and things like that, and we'll talk about that. But that's essentially the goals that we've set to say, hey, how can you get into this great state where you can work in a more relaxed, healthy way, still take healthy breaks, but get stuff done. So that's let us dive in. And something I wanted to point out is, before we get too deep into techniques and tools, is kind of why am I here and why are we talking about this? And for me, it really seems that this is the core of it, which is the office, the place where we do work, has been evolving over the past 100 years. There was a place, if you think about workers 100 years ago, where it was the office was the farm and the boss was your dad, right? And then steam engine, industrial revolution, the office became a factory. And then, you know, computer, the office became like the office that we know. And then most recently with the advent, you know, the pandemic is sort of forcing function, the office kind of became everywhere. You know, hybrid is now the most popular way of working. It is not in office, it's not remote. It's, hey, a couple days a week I'm here, a couple days a week I'm there. So we have a tremendous number of people, myself included, who might work from home, who might work as they're traveling, as well as sometimes co-locate with other people. This is awesome in many ways, but it also presents a bunch of problems around distraction and disconnection. And what I talk about here is, you know, you have all the social media distractions that are even easier when you're, you know, at home or on the road. There are the work from home distractions, because then it's the, oh, I could just go, you know, fold the laundry right now real quick or do something. And the, you know, distractions of your phone just sitting there and you can pick it up and start texting, WhatsApping, doom scrolling. So this affects not just productivity, but also just wellness. And something I wanted to point out is productivity is not actually the goal of what we're going to talk about today. People always have this, not always, very frequently people have these talks and these, you know, blog posts and these great books on like productivity, go be more productive, blah, blah. And actually the way we view productivity is it's more the path. If you can find a way to be healthy and produce what you need to produce, it's actually, productivity is the path to happiness. or self-fulfillment, if you want to think of it that way. And it's not that we're working to work, it's we're working because it gets us to a place that makes us happy. And that's actually the name of my company, the Sukha company. Sukha is Sukha is the Sanskrit word for happiness, and that's very much what this slide is what we believe. Now, I will talk to you now about some of these pieces that might be helpful for you, pieces of the puzzle on your journey forward. When we think about what we actually want, it's probably not productivity. It's not, hey, I want to grind stuff out, or I want to bang my head against the wall. It's actually, I want to get to a place of self-fulfillment. I may want flexibility. I know that's a big one for me and a lot of the people with whom I work, where it's the ability to say, hey, I will get done what I need to get done. I actually can manage myself, or I have a way of optimizing how I want to do it, where I want to do it, what time of day. As long as it gets done well, I want the flexibility. I might not want to drive into an office. I might want to, save the time of commuting if I don't need to co-locate. For a lot of things I could do, at home. And something else we want, and this is really germane after the pandemic, is stress and burnout are a huge deal. A lot of the companies we deal with, that's actually their number one issue. It's not really productivity. It's rather people are quitting, or people are unhappy, or they feel disengaged. And we can't put more stress on them. You can't tell someone I demand that thou art happier, right? Demand thou art more engaged. You kind of have to naturally lead people into situations where it's wow, this feels respectful towards who I am and how I work and how my brain works. And this, what Ellis has put together with this conference, I think is a great example of hey, let's let people get to where they need to be. And I'm not going to tell you how you need to be, but I'll tell you about my skill set, I'll tell you about my tool set, and if these are helpful, I want to give them to you, and that's very much, I think, where we come from for today. So, moving forward. This is deliberately a bewildering slide, and I made this because it is ugly and awful, but it is how we saw this set of solutions, where it's felt like every blog post, every seminar we went to, every webinar, every, one of these books presented a whole different thing. Oh, try the 3-3-3 method, or do the SMART goals, or your task list should be rearranged according to this principle or this technique. Here are ways to distraction block. This was not actually helpful to us, and specifically to me. This was just, oh, there's so much noise, I'm just going to go back and do what I used to do because this was terrible. So what I wanted to talk about today is really just 3 thoughts, and then talk about some specific little tools that support those thoughts. And the reason I chose these 3 are, when you're working, the sound environment you're in can be very helpful or very unhelpful. And I want to talk about some really simple ways to hopefully move that needle more towards helpful. So I'll talk to you about that. Another thing, obviously, is focus. And focus, we've all talked about. It's, what we aspire to find healthy focus. And what are some techniques and tools that do specifically speak to that? And the final one is community. And this is at the core of what we believe, which is, it is that we go farther together. It's that notion of, yes, I can be a little island and try and do things alone, or I can be part of a fabric. And the very nature of talking at a conference about these things is saying we are part of the fabric. I appreciate that you guys are here. I can't wait for the Q&A. I actually budgeted a bunch of time today for Q&A, because it is that thing of saying, oh, here are ideas, but how can these be applicable to you? Please ask me questions, and let me see if I can help with what I've learned. So that said, let us talk about these. I'll tell you a little bit about what I do, and then we'll have a really fun Q&A. So let's talk about sound first. Let's think of this in 2 stages. One stage is silencing the stuff you don't need, and the second stage is filling that silence with things that you do need or want. So in terms of silencing the noise generally comes from 3 things. There's the laptop or the desktop that we're working on, right? Whereas you may be connected through Teams or Slack or other apps that are getting your attention. deliberately. And maybe it's not what you need, but it's what those apps want, to do to your attention. So silencing that noise there is important. Second thing is usually your phone. And I know for me, this is a really big one, which is it just sits there and there are notifications and they know exactly how to design them so that they sound a certain way, they vibrate a certain way, they look a certain way. They've tested this 1 billion times a day to make it as addictive as possible and to develop a Pavlovian response where I have to pick that up, or I'm procrastinating and I pick up my phone and check my messages and things like that. It becomes a beautifully designed sound of just that vibrating or chiming that draws you away. And then the third thing is the world around you, which can be children, dogs, cats, husbands, wives, boyfriends, girlfriends, the laundry needs to be folded, things like that, procrastination techniques. So silencing the noise as much as we can do this, putting your laptop in Do Not Disturb, having a connection to your phone so you don't pick up your phone, that kind of thing I think is really key. And then once you have that silence, filling it. And in this case, there's a bunch of research around this. What kind of music helps you fall into flow? And I will preface what I'm going to say with, there are obviously outliers. We all have the friend that listens to mumble rap, and that's like how she gets in the zone, or, death metal or something, and that's all he can listen to, but he's incredibly happy when he does, right? This is not about the outliers. There is research with a very high N that is, hey, somewhere between 60 to 90 beats per minute, certain key signatures, non-vocal, melodic, rhythmic sounds seem to work a lot for a lot of people. In addition, there's certain nature sounds, depending on where you were raised. Some people really respond to sounds of surf or rain. There's a quality to listening to water sounds that we believe is because they have a low frequency and a high frequency characteristic that's very interesting. Like your brain gets lulled because there's certain waveforms that are very slow as surf comes in and out, but there's also high frequency noise associated with it that disturbs those waveforms. So this is something where if you know what your jam is, absolutely fill the silence with it, or if not, explore things. There's also binaural beats, and the concept of binaural beats is that you explore this with earbuds or with headphones where you can have a different sound in each ear, and it's often very, very, very similar, just separated by a few hertz, 30, 40, 50, 60 hertz. In other words, so if you were listening to music in one ear, in the other ear you might hear the same thing that's just delayed or offset by a certain amount. And it's found with some people, this is kind of a emerging area, to help stimulate the brain, sometimes to be more creative, to come up with ideas it normally wouldn't, or to focus. And there's a long blog post I wrote about this. There's a lot of research on the internet. It's an emerging area, but again, it's just something to consider when you're saying, okay, I've done the first step. I have silence. I can choose to fill that with something that supports me. Now let's talk about focus, which is that second group, and we're 15 minutes in, so I think we're on track. First one is really simple, and I'm so guilty of this. I imagine many people in the neurodivergent community also are, which is multitasking. I'm going to do a little bit of this, a little bit of that. I'll go finish that. I'll come. Is absolutely a myth. There's actually no such thing as multitasking. Mm-hmm. And that might sound crazy because you're like, oh no, Stephen, actually I do this thing where it's I go around to these things. Coming from a computer background, I can tell you, if things are running in parallel, if you're doing things at the same time, that's multitasking. Our brains actually don't. What we do is we do one thing, and then we often call multitasking doing one thing, switching the context over to another thing, doing that, then switching the context either back or to a third thing and doing that. So what you're really doing is you're monotasking, which is real, but in between, you're burning your brain glucose on context switching, saying, well, I'm going to go from paying my bills to, oh, I need to write that email to so-and-so, and you have to put away in your brain the information, the context of paying your bills, and then reopen the file of, oh, that email I need to write to my boss, right? So you keep doing that, you get the same amount of monotasking done, but in between, you literally burn brain energy, which, as you know, if you experiment with productivity, is the thing you should guard jealously. Like the amount of brain energy you have a day to think, you want to use that on the things that actually are meaningful, not context switching. You've probably seen there are a bunch of famous, tech bros, Zuckerberg included, who are famous for wearing the same outfit every day, simply so they do not have to spend brain energy on thinking, what do I wear? It is just, oh, I wear that same t-shirt, same jeans, I have a closet full of them. It is simply so they don't have decision fatigue. They just have one fewer decisions to make that day. So this is multitasking, super simple, and we get that. This is another thing about just being healthy, which is the Pomodoro technique, which some of you may know, but for those who don't, it was named around a kitchen timer that was shaped like a tomato. And tomato, which is Pomodoro in Italian, the Italian guy who came up with this said essentially, hey, what if you work for 25, set this little timer, and then when it goes off, spend 5 minutes on a break. And then you repeat this a few times, and then after a few cycles, maybe take a longer break. And the thing that was brilliant about what he said was not that the idea of breaks were novel, but rather as a sense of like, no, this should be instituted. Like you should have a time, even if it's as simple as a orange or a red tomato sitting next to you, like do this thing. So that notion, we think is very important that you treat this seriously. It helps you be more creative, more productive if you do take breaks, not grinding it out. And also what you do on the breaks is, up to you, but there are some healthy things to do, which are simply sometimes something somatic. And by somatic, I mean do something in your body. Stand up, walk around, do a breathing exercise, stretch. Sometimes just like going outside or looking out the window and letting your eyes focus far away in the distance as opposed to just staring at a laptop can be super helpful. So what do you do on your breaks? Even if it's just a meditation, maybe you just close your eyes for 5 minutes. We strongly support that. And again, it just helps you stay in a healthy state because you don't want to be in flow where it's like you don't go to the bathroom for 8 hours. You want to be in a state of flow where you're productive, but then you're also being healthy. And then the third idea around focus is time boxing, which I didn't believe, to be super transparent with you, when someone presented to me this idea of like, hey man, if you need to write your paper, set aside 2 hours, block it out, have some other event at 2 hours we have to go do. And it's true, that whole phenomenon from college of like, oh, I'm writing my papers at the last minute, it actually, you can move where the last minute is. So if you say, I have 30 minutes to, file my taxes, which I actually had to do this morning, right? It's amazing that if you time box, you say, I will dedicate 30 minutes to this and get it done, that it does fill that amount of time. And if you get more, it will fill more time. So that sort of Peterson principle is very applicable here. And then the third thing I want to talk about, and then we'll move forward, is what I brought up about community. There is research around this. Those of you who have heard or read scientific papers, it's often called social facilitation theory. Again, social facilitation theory. In casual sort of pop psychology papers and blog posts, it's usually called the coffee shop effect. And what this is related to body doubling. I think many of us have done body doubling where it's like, hey, you sort of like work one-on-one, maybe over a Zoom call or something like that with someone, and it helps you be accountable. There's also a more subtle, everyday version of that you can employ, which is there's a measurable productivity boost if you can simply see someone working and you are aware that someone can see you working. It is exactly like being in a coffee shop. I come from a film background. I was a film executive at 20th Century Fox and at DreamWorks, and there was a Starbucks right near my home that was famous for having all of these screenwriters in there. And it was quiet. It wasn't like screenwriter, central, everyone chatting. But it definitely, for the junior screenwriters, was inspiring to see like, hey, 3 tables over, sipping in his latte just like my latte, there's Wesley Strick, or there's David Ayer, or someone, who's a produced screenwriter. And these producer screenwriters would come there because that was their habit, just to be there, be able to look up and look around and feel the community. And that sense of being part of a community is important because when you need to be held up, your community will be there. And you also feel rewarded when someone else needs that support and you're able to give it. And that's a beautiful thing. And that's a huge part of, what we believe. So this is something that, I think a lot of us struggle with, of when you have those bad days or those bad moments, how do you lift yourself out? One of the best ways is to be part of a community of people. So you can raise your hand and go like, hey, I need someone today, or this morning, or right now. And at other times, when someone needs something, you're there. Okay, so I think we're doing pretty well. I'm going to mention, because this is the platform actually how I met Ellis and Ariana, is we developed a simple solution around a lot of these ideas of how to block distractions from your phone, have beautiful music, have timers, have AI coaches modeled on, Ellis and Ariana, and build a sense of community. So this is something that we want to do, is say, how could you have one button to do all these things? And this is what we designed. It's a website that you just run in the background while you work. It blocks your notifications. It plays beautiful music. It helps you time box. You can talk to other people. It's sort of a fun thing to do. Like I said, it gives you focus music and timers and coaches and distraction blocking, and it's all just one button. This is why we designed this. As I mentioned, there's some friendly faces that you'll probably see in there. I know Ariana's having a sprint this week, I think on Tuesday or Wednesday, where it's just like a co-working thing. It's like a body doubling with a group. And that is my email at the bottom left. And I put this here because if I can be helpful in any way, obviously I've spent 5 years studying this and building this. And if there are things that you think of after our Q&A today, where you're like, oh, I wish I had a resource for this, or I'd like to know more about this, please email me. I am pretty good about getting back to everyone within 24 hours. That is my commitment to myself and to others. So very down to chat or help in any way. So that said, I'm going to see if I can figure out how to unscreen share somehow. Stop sharing, maybe. Yeah. Okay. There we go. And I would love to answer any questions that anyone has. Hello, don't everyone speak at once. Or maybe I should check open the chat. Dana, my employers are one of you. I'm sorry about that. Yeah. Yep. Nice card. Okay, Hannah, Alicia, I think you have a question. Not sure it's easier for you to type it or to speak it, but however you'd like.
Is it okay if I speak it? Can you hear me? Okay, thank you. Stephen, can you hear me? Let me type in the chat.
If you step up to the podium,
I can't hear you. I keep seeing your little rectangle flash green.
Can you hear me now?
If you step up to the other side of the podium, everyone will be able to hear you.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Both of you go to the podiums.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
There. Now everyone should be able to hear.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Josh. I'm obviously a newbie at this.
Yeah, so am I.
It's okay. I'm still learning too.
Okay, I feel a little awkward being up here. I do want to ask.
That's all you.
Thank you. I do want to ask, like, once you enter a flow state, like you have everything good.
Can anyone hear her? I can't hear anything.
Oh, okay. Can anyone hear me?
I can.
I hear you just fine. Can you hear me?
Okay, I guess Stephen can't.
Oh. Maybe,
Thanks for answering, guys. Give me a second.
I think everyone can hear her but me, and I'm not sure. I'm sure I'm doing something wrong.
Stephen, can you hear me?
I can hear you perfectly, yes.
I'm not sure why you couldn't hear Hannah.
You know what? I'll type
I'm
it.
dying to hear what you have to say, and I don't know what I should do.
I'm going to type it.
I think I'm standing next to you and facing you at this point. If there was a jump up and down button, I'd use that too. Okay, I could try muting my.
Stephen, can you hear me?
He's muted himself. He's muted himself. And
I don't know if you can hear me. Stephen, can you type if you can?
Josh, you can hear me, right?
I can.
Okay, don't worry.
Okay,
I'll type it.
What is the difference?
I do not know.
Technology is just very hard.
Programmers are in fact magicians, and I don't understand it either.
I know. Okay, so I wonder if I walk. Hannah, can you hear me now?
I can hear you, Stephen.
Okay, I can hear you.
You can hear me?
Yes.
I don't know if anyone else can, but I'm just going to ask you.
Everyone's crowd around Hannah.
no, oh my God. Okay, so I'm just gonna ask you, once you enter the flow state, like everything's good and you're all there, oh my God, I feel so awkward. And let's say you're writing or you're starting to write. My problem is that once I'm in flow state, I hit a block. Like I will start writing and I'm like, wow, everything's good. Like I'm supposed to be in flow state, but I'm not. I keep slipping out of it. And then I feel like I'm doing something wrong. So how do you kind of maybe deal with that, like maintaining the flow state, I guess, when you're struggling
I'm
to.
I'm gonna step behind a podium and repeat what you said so everyone can hear that.
Okay.
See how to. Okay, I hope people can hear me. Let me repeat. What Hannah was asking about is she's reporting a phenomenon where she can get into a flow state and then sometimes hit a block with writing or creating that she's doing, and then with that block not really know how to get over that. This is actually really common, and I'm glad you asked that because I did not mention it. There are a couple of thoughts I want to share. One of them, and there's a great book on this that's written from the neuroscience point of view called The Net and the Butterfly. And it's written by Olivia Fox-Caban. And what it talks about is the way our brains create ideas. And she studied a number of people who have come up with like those ideas that have moved the world forward. The interesting thing that she talks about is the way, and I'm going to be very reductive about this because this is a contained talk, but you're welcome to explore the book. She talks about there's basically, when we're very young, a default mode network in our brains. It's just like oh, hey, here's something I learned how to pick up with my hand. I put it in my mouth, or I bang it against my head and try and figure out what it is, right? And then as we grow more mature, we have this executive sort of mode network which executes action, and that's the one that now takes us to, oh, it's 8:15, I need to be in the car and execute the driving action to get to the work, or I'm going to execute the work action and I need to comb my hair and all that kind of stuff. And something that's interesting is that the default network is the one that usually surfaces those interesting, weird ideas of like, oh, wow, here's something to write about or to draw or paint or, create, or a solution to a problem that I have. And the executive network is usually focused on things that are not so much. So like, well, let me get that down on paper. Let me go, brush my teeth and let me go write that thing. So what you're talking about is very common when you haven't let the default mode network bubble up those weird kind of like, hey, what about this? Ooh, chocolate and peanut butter together. Whereas the executive mode network will keep chocolate and peanut butter in separate little, jars labeled. The default one is what's like, oh, look at that, Reese's peanut butter cups are created. So the first thing I want to share with you is that notion, which is if you explore that book, it talks about ways to keep your executive mode network sort of occupied, which allows you to have your default mode network sort of run freely, not being overseen. And a phenomenon that's talked about, or some phenomena that talked about very frequently among these like creative thinkers who get over those blocks that you're talking about, is that they have those ideas when they're doing things like walking, showering, brushing their teeth, driving, and the common element there is that it's something that occupies that executive mode network where it's like, I must drive right now. And in the middle of driving, the default network goes, what's a great thing to write about? You should write a blog post about this, or you should go paint that, or you should do whatever. You're brushing your teeth, the thing. So sometimes when you run dry on that, that is an interesting thing to try, which is like, let me just go for a walk and do something completely unrelated to this. The second thing I wanted to share, and then I'll be brief, is, and it's something that I believe Hemingway is credited with saying, but I'm sure many other creators have said this, which is always stop when there's still creative juices. So if you notice that, hey, you generally write for an hour or an hour and a half, whatever, before you hit a block, write for 45 minutes and stop when you still actually have things to do, because it's helpful when you then come back from a 10-minute break to have that thing to start writing, as opposed to write to the end and then you've sort of, your tank is on empty, and to start up again. And I think Hemingway always said, like, I always stop that day when I still have something to write. So tomorrow morning when I wake up, I know the thing I'll begin with. I hope that, what was the name of the book again? Thank you, Marnie, for typing while I was pontificating. Okay, so who has, I hope that answered your question, Hannah.
The net and the butterfly.
Find ways to engage your executive networks, your default network, and have cool ideas, and also stop before your tank's on empty. Who else has something they would like to talk about?
So I struggle with the whole shut everything down, block out all the distractions. But to do that, I have to go look at all the distractions to turn off notifications and whatnot. And it's just like, this isn't helping.
May I respond to that? I will respond to that. And Dana, thank you, by the way. I could hear you, which was super helpful. So I agree with you. It's very much why we built our platform, because you can wire up that one button that will mute your distractions, start your flow music, like start your timer for your Pomodoros. Like, it does everything, because I just am too lazy to have to do like 4 or 5 things to start work. I will usually just start work if it wasn't that easy. So that's literally why we built it. So there's just one button and it's like, okay, I'm ready to go. And, beautiful music's playing. Or I'll mention this, something I've been addicted to recently is a sound engineer friend was in Kathmandu and recorded 2 hours of rain up in the Himalayas. And he gave it to us, and we made a playlist of just rain up in the Himalayas. And I've been listening to that. I don't know why, but it gets me like in the zone. So find out, whatever your jam is, and do that. Ooh, okay. So I see someone post something on a smaller scale. Erica, on a smaller scale, I think fidgets might serve similar purposes as bigger activities. Yes. Completely agree with you. Yes. Like fidget spinners and things like that. Like, there's definitely something about, like, it's occupying the part of your brain that executes action. So it's not sort of squashing or stifling the default part of your brain. It's just like, oh, hey, a fire truck. What does it taste like? Not so good. What is it? Oh, look, it runs on the floor, that kind of thing. Does anyone know if these talks are going to be recorded? Yes. Anna, Ellis actually walked me through this. Josh is here as the maestro, and he has a recording of this. I know Ellis was going to edit it down, check the captions, and post it. So this will be available. And I sure hope that it's worth your time. Should you review this tomorrow or whenever else post it, I hope you're like, oh, this is good. Not like, what the hell was that? Yes, Maestro. Okay, what else can we talk about? Yeah, okay, don't be like the Phantom of the Opera. His flow state may sound cool in theory, but he doesn't know how to shut it off and lets consume all his actions when he considers anything acceptable in his art, including murder. Danielle, I'm not sure, is that a question? Maybe you could clarify what you're saying. I'm not sure if that's something you were just saying as a statement or if it was a question about something. Is there something I thought about? Oh, gotcha, okay. Thank you for sharing that, I guess. And yes, this is a very fancy pirate ship. Okay, fellow ADHD here. Do you find you can force a flow state whenever you need to, or do you have to wait for the time your brain allows you to focus? So, Hannah, I will give you this answer, which is, I've been creating this platform for a few years, and it was around these ideas like, how can I get my whole community, like there are thousands of us every day that come to do this. So I know that in general, the more you do it, like any sort of like muscle motion, it becomes easier. Like the first time you throw a basketball and the second time, they both feel awkward. The 100th time gets better. 1000th time, you kind of do it in your sleep. So I don't know you can force a flow state, because you're right, it's not exactly that sort of like forcing thing, but it definitely is something that the more you press that button, you hear the music, it sort of cues your brain into, oh, we're going to write for an hour and get like a ton of stuff done, the better it gets. But there is no guarantee. I'm sorry, you can't force stuff. And I'll also be able to answer that. Very true. Okay, it's like a bedtime routine. Yeah, it's like a bedtime routine. That's a very good point. Yeah, it's kind of like going to sleep. Like after a while, if you know, like having a chamomile tea and like a warm bed or whatever gets you to sleep, yes. It doesn't work every time, but very helpful. Okay, next question. Anyone now? You have all of my attention. Is there anything I can do to help?
Okay, so talk to me about the music in your app. Can it be programmed to whatever mood we're in?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, we have, I think it's like 15 different playlists. And you can choose if you're in like an upbeat mood, if you need something down tempo, if you want to listen to like global sort of beats, like more international kind of like rhythms, as well as, and I don't know, this is maybe a little further afield, but if any of you guys have experimented with brown noise, which is like called like the sound of the earth, or pink noise, there's certain kinds of random noises that sound like warm static. It's not exactly my jam, but we had a ton of people ask for it in the space that are like into productivity, so we created playlists for that, so that's in there. Also the nature playlist I mentioned, there are like hundreds of hours of, if you want to listen to the sound of a forest, and just imagine you're working in a forest. You're on a beach in Cyprus. You're in the Himalayas listening to rain. You're next to a stream. There's one recorded by a mountain stream in Japan, if you like just hearing a burbling stream. And there's also the ability to hook up your Spotify. So if you're like, this is all lovely, Stephen, but actually my jam is like this playlist I have, hook up your Spotify and listen to that. So there's a lot of different options in there. Marvelous. Oh, Erica. Okay. Well, I hope I just addressed that. Yes, you have a Spotify playlist. There's a button where you can hook up your Spotify. Marnie, how does flow state differ from hyper focus? This is such a good question, which I learned about after being diagnosed with ADHD. And you are right. There is an element of commonality. It's a really, really good question, because there's a part of just like diving deep in where you're carried along. For anyone who doesn't know, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, who is the Hungarian psychologist who named this thing flow. He wrote this seminal book called Flow, and he's the one who did the research to go like, wow, it's really similar, has some of these great thinkers describe their concentrated states, right? So the reason he called it flow was that he found a common element in talking with them or reading about them, that they said it's like when you suddenly get to a point where you're carried forward, like there's a momentum that is almost like natural and carries you forward. He said maybe it's like a river, where if you can get into the river, it helps you move forward as well as you paddling. And so that's why he called this flow and flow states. So to go and answer your question about hyperfocus, so one of the guardrails we wanted to put up, because yes, hyperfocus cannot always be healthy. Like, we believe focus is powerful, but too much of anything, cannot be good, is that we do in Sukha, in my platform, encourage you to take healthy breaks. You have an AI coach. Like, you can literally, if you want, have Ellis as your AI coach, and her voice will be like, hey, it's been 25 minutes. Why don't we stand up and stretch? Why don't we go for a walk? And sort of encourages you to break out of that state. So you do things like have a glass of water on this break. So we don't want to spiral out of control. A very good question. Thank you, Marnie. Daniel, I have some particular movies I recommend that work for me. I'm not sure how to say it. Daniel, I would love to hear that. If you want to email me, the Stephen@thesukha.co. Very happy to explore. I mean, most of the music we have in there has literally come from members of our community. They're like, I love brown noise and pink noise, and I want to hear a stream. So let's do that. Green noise. That's a new one for me. Brown noise and nature sounds. Wow. Okay. You know more than I do. That's super cool. I didn't know the thing. I knew white noise, brown noise, and pink noise. So there's that. I'm happy to look into that. Erica, you did address it. Bring your own music. Yes, very much so. Dana, can we attach our YouTube music streams? Okay, Dana, I'll tell you this. We experimented with integrating with YouTube, and there was something about YouTube music where they forced ads. If you did an integration, like their API still played ads, and we found that disruptive. And I respect you. Google is a huge trillion-dollar company. They know what they're doing. They're brilliant at what they do. But for us, we just didn't see the value of connecting with YouTube if it meant that every 8 minutes or something you heard an ad for something. So I'm sorry about that. We turned that one off. 3-minute warning. Thank you. Glad you're drinking water. Actually, I have my water right here. And Spotify. Oh, thank you, Daniel. Yep, YouTube, of course, has issues, yes. Even though it's YouTube Premium, I can look into it again. When we wired it up, ads always came through for YouTube Music, YouTube Premium. It was a thing, but we can look into that. Okay, 1 minute. Does someone have a 1 minute question to close us out? This has actually been super fun, and I really appreciate you guys coming to listen, and I hope something I said was helpful for somebody. So this is it. You can speak it. You can type it. And it's been very helpful. Joshua, thank you.
Oh,
Dana.
The notes, the chiding messages. Are we able to customize them as to our particular capabilities or dysregulations? That is get up and walk. Well, if you can't walk, that some other kind of movement would have to be inserted.
I'm glad you asked that, because in the next version of our coaching, that will be possible. The way it works right now is you have a certain number of controls. You can obviously play with the volume of the coach, or you can mute your coach. If you're like, hey, I don't need to hear Ariana right now, even though, by the way, she's hilarious as a coach. So you have the ability to play with the volume or mute them. You also have the ability to turn on or off if you like words of encouragement. And if you do, on a random schedule, your coach will chime in and be like, hey, great job, or so glad you're still in here, things like that. I personally love that because it does make me feel less lonely, I guess, less disconnected, and more like, oh yeah, that's right, Ariana's, you're looking out for me in some weird way. So you have the ability to do that. And something coming up is you will have much more variability to say, hey, you know what? I don't need notifications about drinking water, but I do need, this thing, or I'd like a notification about going for a walk or not going for a walk, things like that. But that's not on the platform now. It's on our roadmap for the year. Okay, Marnie, thank you for coming to speak. You're very welcome. Questions for later. Erica, you are very welcome. Yeah. Anything I need to remind us? Oh, Alexis.